And then ultimately, you should be able to click the products link and actually see some products there. It's no fun to try to test a site that just doesn't work. Would be a lot of failing tests. So if you're having any issues, you can grab Sasha or I. Hey, man. And I think a couple other people are going to be coming in. So if you have it working and you notice that your neighbor is broken still, you can help them click the links to get this working. All right, I'm going to keep going, but if you, like I said, if you get the database error, then just raise your hand and Sasha will help you. But I think we mostly have it. Okay, before coffee, we had just created our feature for our product admin. So I said the next thing is to create a scenario. And I'm not going to give you guys the scenario. You have to create the scenario yourself. But I will kind of pretend like I am the product owner. And let me get some nice line breaks here. So imagine that you are having a conversation with a manager, or product owner, somebody, and they basically say this. They say, hey, if I start on the home page and click the admin link and then click the products link, I should see, well, they would probably say, then I should see a list of products. That's probably what they would say. What we're going to do for now is create a scenario that's similar to this. This is just the text, the title, the H1 that shows up on that page. So this is kind of my way of saying that when I click the products link, I should see that header. So kind of translate this into the scenario. So you're going to have the scenario line, the given, when, and then below there. Oh, and one thing you're probably wondering is, what kind of language should I use here? Like how should I exactly structure those sentences? So we know it's given, when, and then. So you know you should start there. After that, technically you can construct those sentences however you want, whatever's most natural. So you could say something like, given I am on slash, when I click admin. You could just, whatever sounds natural to you. Now that's the theoretical answer. The real answer is, remember when we, before the break, we ran Behat with -DL. We got our big definition list. If you can use language that matches those expressions, then you won't actually have to write any PHP code. So, for example, I'll help you guys out with this a little bit because it's a giant list. Actually, I'm going to give you guys 1 minute to do it first. So first what I want you to do is actually just do the given, when, and then, but don't worry about getting the language exactly right yet, because I'll help you out with what those built-in definitions are. Just use some language that's natural to you, like given I am on slash, when I click admin. Just do your best to kind of fill out a user story, a scenario that sounds natural to you and has kind of follows this story. So you'll have given, when, and then. Once you've done this, you can try running Behat. It'll dump out the functions. Don't copy those because we don't need to do that. But you can go ahead and run Behat, and you can just see like normal. When Behat sees a sentence that it doesn't recognize, it kind of dumps the function out for you. But you don't actually need to copy any functions into your feature context. We're going to change our language in a second to kind of fit what is there. But just use whatever language is natural right now. Brilliant.
Do, for example, git add, and when we make the changes to match the Mink language,
that's a good idea.
We can do the git and see that this is actually the same thing. We just adopted it to language that Mink understands, because it provides some already predefined steps.
Mm-hmm.
Actually.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The difference between you and people that already use Behat is that you know, they know the exact steps that they should write to match expected.
And after you've used Behat for a week or two, you really have them memorized. I know there was that big list of 40, maybe 40 built-in definitions. You really use maybe 7 of those, so you don't use most of them most of the time. Oh yeah, thank you.
And it's worth mentioning that another benefit of writing these scenarios is that this is the actual documentation of your product, of your project that you're working on. And other developers in your team will benefit because when new developer jumps in, he just flips through these scenarios, run them, and he knows how to do things, how to add a product, how to delete it, just by reading these scenarios.
This is actually true. This is not just some theoretical thing. We have people come on big complex projects, and a lot of times they'll say, hey, I need you to add a button to this feature, and they'll say, they'll just go look at the scenario, say, oh, I understand why we're building this. I understand the capabilities are. So it absolutely is correct. So make sure you have this say scenario, not feature. I messed that up, but you guys caught me. Okay. So whatever you have, hopefully it feels natural to you. So I want you guys to change it to use the built-in language. Again, you don't have to do this. If you wanted to, you could keep your language, but then you would just need to copy the functions, run Behat, copy the functions into your feature context class, and then actually do the work to command Mink to do those things. We don't want to do that because there's already built-in functionality, so that's why we're going to change our language here. So let's see, given I am on. So that's a built-in definition that tells Mink to go to a URL. Oh, my bad.
There's a built-in for the homepage. So you can just say
Yeah, that's true. I'm gonna write that with a comment. Yeah, there is a really good find. There is actually a built-in one for the homepage. You can say, given I am on the homepage as well. And of course, we're going to be adding our own stuff later to this. So we have a bunch of built-in sentences, cool, but later, if you wanted to, you could have something that says, given I am on the admin page. And you would just make your own definition for that. And assuming I haven't messed something up.
follow.
Oh, good. Why follow? Sasha, why is it follow and not click? I was actually just wondering if.
It's some kind of alias, no? Yeah, click is for button, right?
No, it's press for button. There's actually no good. I was just wondering if you had any background on it. Yeah, I think it's because.
In code, you will see that I'm not sure. I can't remember by heart, but if you open the Mink or raw Mink extension, you'll see that it is doing actually a similar thing for click. For click, it finds a link with a title.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Click actually just doesn't exist. So.
Just what is handier for you to write, because this is.
Well, actually, we're going to do this next. So actually, click doesn't actually work yet. There actually is no click out of the box, or at least there wasn't in the past. The reason it's follow is because, I believe, which I should just fix someday, is that Behat was created by a non-native English speaker, and he used the word follow.
Yeah, the guy is from Ukraine, right?
Not Ukraine, Belarus.
Everest?
Yeah, he's Belarusian.
But he's native Russian speaker.
Yeah. So that's the reason why. Yeah, there's no. I was actually asking Sasha. I was like, if maybe he knew better than I did. I always assumed it's because his name is Konstantin and he used the word follow instead of click. Actually, the next thing we're going to do, because I never do this in my project, is we're going to create a custom step that says I click, because nobody says I follow, except for us for 1 minute. So if you have this, you should be able to run it. And either it'll pass because I did it correctly, or it'll fail because I'm lying to you. But it should pass, hopefully. And of course, behind the scenes, this is still using curl. It should feel like a browser. There are real HTTP requests going in the background. You don't see a browser, but it was really happening. It's just not faking it or something. It's actually going out to the URL. How does it know what, actually, I'll ask you guys. You saw it earlier. How does it know what host name to use? When we just say, given I am on /, how does it know which host name? Exactly. Yeah, exactly. The behat.yml file we copied says that in there, so it's not black magic or anything like that. What's cool about Behat and Mink is we're going to change this a little bit, but initially this has nothing to do with our application. This application could be written in Java and up on a production server. There's no integration at all. We're just making real HTTP requests. So it's a really good option, honestly, for testing older code bases that you can't really test in any other way because it's just a website. Awesome. I'm going to go around real quick and make sure that's working for everybody. Remember, there's extra credit at the bottom of most of these steps if you do have this working. Is that working?
No.
No?
No. It's not in the list. For
To,
whatever reason.
okay. What happens when we run? Oh, it's still, I think, yeah. Oh, sorry, I clicked off of it on accident. Try it again. You're not going to see that. What you will see is a definition that says, then I should see wildcard. Then I should see anything. Down.
Given, isn't there?
It's a then.
Should be in the bottom.
So
Shouldn't I say given first?
then. I'm just looking for the one that's then I should see. It's one of these. It's not exactly this one, but there's one in here that's similar to this. Then I should see, but there's no element part. I just can't remember exactly where it is. Yeah. Good idea. Yeah, there we go. Then it's a regular expression, should see, and then that big ugly thing there is a regular expression that says.
What about the when?
Which one?
When? No,
When I follow?
Given, I guess, first.
Mm-hmm.
There's no given here.
Given I am on the home page.
Right.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they're all in there. Yep.
Cryptic.
It's cryptic because it has regular expressions. Yeah, it doesn't read as quite as nicely as ours do. So you should be able to actually run Behat. Ah, see, so I was about to say, which is good, that if it doesn't match one of these, if it doesn't find one, that it will print it out. Now we know it should have found it, so this tells me that we probably just don't have the language quite right in our step. Then I should see, take out the words of the text. Should just be, then I should see.
Right.
And of course, if you really did want to use this language because it felt more natural, you could just copy that function in and implement it yourself. So there's nothing wrong with that. And yours is happy? It's good? Is it good? Awesome. Good, good.
Don't worry about me, my dev environment.
It blew up.
Yeah, pretty much.
Awesome.
So, but I'll catch up.
And we have the branches too.
Yeah, of course.
So-
But I still want to go through the steps.
Cool. Cool. I'm sorry.
I just joined here 10 minutes ago. Is
Ah,
it too
great.
late for me to
No, it's
sign
not
in?
actually, because we have, let's see, I'm on step 7. Open up the 07 file. And then, oh, dang it, I left it off this one thing. Open up 06. I thought I had a link there, but I'm missing it. Open up 02. I realize that I'm missing a link on many of these. Open up 01. I have a link somewhere. I thought I had it on every slide. Hold on one second. There is a way to catch up because we have branches. I just need to get a link. Oh, I see. Cool. That's the link. Do a git pull. That's why we didn't have the links on yours. So yeah, when you get a chance to do a git pull, there's a couple extra fresh things that'll come down.
So where do I stand?
Yeah, right here, do git pull. Perfect. And then on here, if you scroll down a little bit, it basically says you can run these commands here to go to the right branch, but replace step 03 rename arguments with, scroll down, we're on step 7, so step 7 list scenario.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, let me know if you have any issues.
It's correct, we only tested something.
Oh, testing to see if it fails. Very nice. So I just want to highlight that what's cool here is that we really haven't actually written any PHP code yet for testing this. We have so many built-in steps that all we did was once we added the behat.yml file and extended Mink extension. So once we or Mink context, once we installed Mink extension, all we needed to do was to create a feature file with a scenario with the right language, and it just works. So there's a lot of built-in functionality already. You only need to actually write PHP code when we need to do something that's not in that list, something like a little bit more custom, which we're going to do in a second. So there's already a lot that you can do. If you are in a company that has not done a lot of testing in the past, so maybe there's not a culture of testing, if you can just get this installed, then you can do at least some very basic testing with almost no effort. You could say, if I can write it using these built-in steps, I'll do it. And if I have to do something custom, I'll do it later. But at least you can get some tests for some very basic, the most important parts of your site. So when you get into testing, you don't have to be like, we're going to test. Oh no, that's so much. We have such a big site. No. Install it, test 3 pages. And that's a million times better than having no pages. Okay, so we have this working, and it's good. It's actually testing our application. The next thing we're going to do is actually, I don't like the word follow. You guys don't like the word follow. Nobody likes the word follow. So we're going to add iClick. And the process here, just thinking about it, is change the word follow to click, because that feels more comfortable to you. Rerun Behat. What is Behat going to do when it sees a sentence that it doesn't recognize? It's going to print out a function with the regular expression like text above it. The only thing that's new, because this is exactly the same process we did earlier with the ls scenario. You know, we put it in, we put a step it didn't recognize, we ran Behat, we copied the function out, we pasted it into feature context. You'll do that over and over again. The only thing that's new here is that we're going to be using a little bit of, well, sort of, we're going to be using a little bit of Mink code. The only thing we haven't really looked at yet is how we do access the Mink library from within feature context. And actually, in this case, we're even going to avoid that. Because we already know the fact that we can say I follow, we already know there's some built-in function that clicks links. And in fact, there's a function called click link in our parent class in the Mink context that we're extending. So all you need to do in your new function is just call this arrow click link and just pass it the text. So I'm still avoiding doing any real work. I'm just saying there's probably a built-in functionality already for clicking links, since we can say I follow and then some link. So let's just use that. How did I know that function was called click link? There's no real way to know. I just opened up that class and just found the function that matched when I follow. So if you open up that parent class, that Mink context, and search for the word follow, you'll find a function with that text above it. And the name of that function is called click link. So the whole goal of this step is to just try to use more language that's more natural to us by doing as little effort as possible. Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting the snippets. It says I should check my configuration.
Oh, interesting. We're not generated. I think I might know. You probably won't be the only one. You still need to have the snippet accepting. I think that's what it is. Yeah. That's the little bit that kind of tells Behat it's okay for you to write my code. That's kind of silly, actually. Okay, cool, no problem. So go to just /admin and take off this slash, and then click reload DB. Yeah, now you can go back and click products, and yes, there we go. Oh, go back to show me the failure. H showing, yeah. Perfect. See, you were just proving that it should fail. That's a very good idea. Awesome. Is that working out?
I'm switching between branches. I've been working on.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so I've been working on this one, and I'm on step 6 product admin feature. That is where actually right now, right?
This is actually this is step 8 now.
Step 8. Okay.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah. So you have that product admin feature. Yep. We just need to change that follow to click. So when I click instead of follow, because follow is a weird word.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then if you rerun Behat now, perfect, yep. Now it doesn't recognize that, which is good, because there's no built-in functionality for that.
So I have to put in feature context.
Exactly, yep. Good. Sorry, man, excuse me. How's it going? Good? Okay. We can fix this. Oh, actually, first, go to open your command line. Okay, yeah, perfect, man. Thank you. Just make. Cool. Okay, cool. Oh, my bad. Sage1 dash R. Actually, I need a capital R. I'm usually better on even on. Is it German keyboard?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I meant to do. There we go. And I'll go back. Reload database. Okay, there we go. That was my fault because I set things up wrong. Then I should see. Exactly. Very nice. Oh, I think we have an extra. Actually, we don't need to do that. It should be a built-in one. I think we just have an extra space right there. There's 2 spaces between. Yeah, there we go. No, then. Oh, we have 2 thens. We have. Don't have and then, just have then. So given. Yep. Yeah, do that. This should pass. Or at least get closer to localhost. Oh, I think I know what happened. Open up the behat.yml file. Yes, I think you have a slightly out-of-date version of the project. Change this to be behat.ezsc. Yeah. There we go. That's interesting. Line 53. Do this arrow. So $ this, and then the little kind of like dash arrow thing. Yeah, and then directly you can get rid of the underscore parent. So just this arrow, click link. Yep, and actually no parent at all. So remove the parent part. That's it, yep. Oh, I understand, yeah. What you need is, actually remove this temporarily, and then run the test. Okay, cool, so it passes, this is awesome. Now change the word follow to click. Exactly, just because it seems more natural. There we go, now it generates this. This is good. And yeah, go ahead and copy that. Perfect. Now here is where you say this arrow, click link. So so replace that throw, yeah, get rid of that. Perfect. Then pass it that, yep. Yep, and that click link is just a function that's on the parent Mink context that we're extending. There you go. Cool. Yeah, no problem. Okay. Good.
I use this method click link argument. I get when I run PHP.
And I click. Yeah, and a link with proxy. It's as if it doesn't see that link when I click admin and I click products.
Oh, maybe the base URL.
I don't think so, because it would have failed on that one. Oh, actually, you're right. It is the base URL.
Yeah.
Huh.
I'm working a little bit differently.
Okay. Good job. Okay. If you're having any issues, then grab Sasha's attention, and we'll definitely catch you up, but I think most everybody is caught up, so I want to keep going. So again, the goal of this was just more natural language, but nothing too impressive yet. Really, the only thing that we have yet to talk about is using Mink inside of the feature context. Like if you really need to do something custom, like what's an example of something custom? Like if you needed to, let's say you have a link on your page, and your page is so, well, let's say it's an old site, so your link doesn't even have any text. Your link is just an image, and the image doesn't even have an alt attribute. So you're breaking all the rules. Well, you can't click that because the built-in step that says when I click, that uses text. So that's actually an important thing that I want to say again. When you have things, those built-in steps, like when I click and then a piece of text, this is using the text of the thing. This is not going to find the CSS element or anything like that. So if you say when I click dot nav dash bar space A, that is not going to find it. All of the built-in definitions are all using the text matching, not CSS. Do not use CSS in any of these. And that's done on purpose because we never want CSS in our scenarios. Because your product admin has no idea what .navbar space a dot something means. We want to keep our scenarios at their technical level. So this is actually a really good thing, but when I started using Behat, I got really frustrated with this because I didn't realize that. And so I routinely would say things like when I click, try to use CSS, and it wouldn't work, and I didn't understand what was happening. It's always using the text. It's the same with forms, which is what we're going to do next. We're going to create a new product. And you have a built-in step that reads like when I fill in name with, the name of the product. Those that when you do that, you're actually talking about the label, the visual label, not the ID attribute, not the CSS, not the name attribute, nothing visible. It's actually the text. So add a second scenario. And again, there's lots of built-in definitions, but you're going to use very few of them. The definitions that we used on our first scenario, those are the most common ones. When I go to this page, I click this link, then I should see. The only other common ones that we haven't seen yet are for forms. So between the first scenario and this scenario, you guys are going to see, you're going to see like all of the most common scenarios, all the most common built-in definitions. So go ahead and write this scenario. And again, try to use, if you try to use built-in language as much as possible. We haven't seen the one yet for filling in a form field, so you can just write something that feels natural, or you can try to find the one that fits it. In a second, I'll show you exactly what it should look like. But go ahead and give it an attempt. Oh, and actually, this is an important detail. And this is actually a funny thing that happened. So I just told you to never put CSS or ID attributes or anything ever in your scenario, except for right now. We are going to do it here temporarily. We're going to cheat. The complication is that our add new button doesn't actually have any text. It's just an icon. So there's no way to use the built-in functionality correctly. So actually, when I said that this uses the text, I was lying a little bit. It uses the text or the ID attribute, but you should never use the ID attribute, except for right now, for like 1 minute. So that was another reason it confused me, because it seemed like it sometimes worked. So it does support the ID attribute and the name attribute, but don't actually use it that way. We always want to use visual text, except for temporarily. Good. Yeah, it uses exact matching for the ID, whereas for the text, it's fuzzy matching. And this will be the thing that we fix next. We don't have the tools yet to kind of do this correctly, and so we have to use the ID attribute. And some of these should be familiar. You're just like, okay, I know how to start on a page given I am on. That's the built-in language. Clicking a link, we know how to do that. And I will cheat. I need you guys to check my work because again, this here, this name and this price, those are the labels. So make sure I have that correct. And this here is the text that you see on the button. So I'm just doing this by memory, so make sure I have those right or else it won't pass. That's this right here. That's what you'll put in that box. You mean like test for it afterwards? It is, yeah. So you couldn't just say, I mean, like, could I just say, like, I fill in name? You couldn't out of the box, but you could add that. And in some cases, it makes sense. If you routinely just need to fill in a box with something, but you don't care at all what it is. Because in this case, you're right, we don't really care. We're not actually testing for the fact that you have a product that says foo in it. So yeah, that makes sense. And I actually do like doing that. I like doing as little as possible in my tests. So if I don't care about a detail, like a really common one is I need to log in at the beginning of a scenario, and we'll do this in a second, but I don't care who I'm logged in as, so I'll just say given I'm logged in. I won't say given I am logged in with username Weaver Ryan and password this, because who cares? I need to be logged in. That's it.
You have a lot of cases like this. For example, if I pay the credit card, you don't care about any details.
That's right. Yeah.
That's perfectly common scenario, perfectly common example.
So we're just saying as a best practice, do as little work here as possible. If there was another field called description and you didn't care what was in there and maybe it's not required, don't fill it out. There's no reason to put extra details in here that aren't really important. And obviously this should pass. So if it's not passing, then I've given you bad directions. So again, between what you see in these two scenarios, these are the definitions you'll use 99% of the time. There are other ones, but they're much less common. You can do almost anything with clicking links and filling out fields and pressing buttons. Notice this is not actually important, but it'll mess you up once. You press buttons, you click links. And they're not interchangeable. So if you click a button, you'll see an error that says, no link save found. And you'll say, what? It's right there. It's a button. You have to press buttons. You have to click links. It's not going to work interchangeably. Cool. If you're having any issues, you can look around confused, and I'll come over. Yeah.
Product, but it doesn't seem like it's pausing.
You try it now.
Let's see. New product link not found.
When I click, oh, you need to. Oh wait, no, that's not it. Take off the slash.
This one?
The trailing slash. Yep. I'm using Silex, and Silex, a slash and not a slash are two different pages. Yeah.
Now it's only the button, which is the issue.
When I press save, that's exactly what I was talking about. It was good to see that. Because you say, what the hell? There's a link called save.
Let's see.
Yeah, nice. Nice.
made it work, and everything works fine.
Cool, man.
But one thing, here I get it's a little bit from PHP Storm. I don't know.
Yeah, it's because technically, so you know how the annotations above the functions say things like when I click :arg1. Well, you can also use regular expressions if you want to. You could say when I click, you know, all these parentheses, things like that. The core built-in definitions use regular expressions, and they do it just to be even more specific and make sure things match. So that's PHP Storm actually being really smart and reading it, but giving you verbatim the regular expression. Anytime you see a quote and then a bunch of regular expression, then a quote, it's just a wild card. So quote, anything, quote, that's what it's doing. Nice. That's cool that it has that integration. That's actually a brand new feature of the latest PHP Storm version. It didn't do that correctly before that version. So I'm happy to see that. Great. You guys good? Hmm?
Here's something interesting. How to handle this?
Oh yeah, I'll fix that. So what happened is, open your feature context class.
Feature context.
And here, originally, it said class feature context implements.
Okay, so I need to implement it and extend it.
Exactly. So just add an implements, and it was. You still have the use statement on top. It's like snippet something. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, good question. Cool. You guys all happy? Good? Good? Awesome. Green, green, green. Good, Bruno? Awesome. All right, guys. So now we need to fix that. So I had to use the ID. So this is still all very easy. It's all built-in definitions, okay? The one thing that we were talking about we violated is we used an ID in there. We don't want to do that. So instead, so what do we do when we have something that just can't be done with a built-in definition? You just replace it with as natural a sentence as you can, and then we're going to need to implement it manually. Okay, and it's not actually going to be that much work. So in this case, I'm just going to replace it with, so instead of saying when I click and then using the ID, just say, well, when I click the plus icon. And that text is not important. I just invented that just because it sounds natural to me. So you could use a different sentence structure if you want to here, because we are going to run Behat and we're going to implement this manually. So go ahead and add that, run Behat, copy the function into feature context, and then for the actual body of that function, we'll do that part together. But we're going to use Mink to actually find the element by CSS, and then click it. So change the text to use that, run Behat, it's going to print the function out, copy the function to the feature context. So it's some function that has a name similar to that, right? By the way, it's probably obvious, but the name of the function is not important at all. It's the fact that it has the annotation above it. So you could name your function whatever you wanted. So remember in Mink, there are, the most important object in Mink is that session object, which represents the browser tab. Okay? And then from the session, you can get the page, which is like the jQuery element. And from the page, you can use CSS to find individual elements. So session, page, and then node. But everything starts with that session. So if we could get access to the Mink session object from here, then we'd be really dangerous. And in fact, we can do that. That was easy. This is because this is basically because we're extending the Mink context. The Mink context has a get session method in it. So when we run Behat is instantiating Mink for us, and then giving us access to the Mink session in case we need it. So what we're going to do in here is, whenever you have a custom definition like this, it's always the same thing. It's always get the session, find an element via CSS, and then do something with it, like click it or check its text and maybe do an if statement or something. So in this case, I have to cheat real quick because I want to get the exact code here. This one's actually a little bit tricky, but what we're going to do is we need to find the element via CSS. Well, all it is a link that has an icon inside of it that has a certain class. So we're just going to use CSS to find that icon with that class, find its parent element, which is the anchor, and then click that. So it's actually a pretty advanced case of using CSS. This is going to feel new to you because we haven't done this very often, but I promise you that each time you do a custom definition, it's going to be something very similar to this. Find the session, get the session, get the page, which is like the jQuery object, and then use the find method to look for whatever elements you're actually looking for. By the way, there's also a find all, which returns an array of elements matching that. So find is one, find all is an array in case you're looking for multiple things. And then once you find the element that you need, you usually do something with it. In this case, it's actually a little bit different because we need the parent element. We need the anchor around the link, or around the icon.
Would it work if you click icon?
Oh, I don't know.
I think it would be.
It would. You're totally right. Let's try it. I think Sasha's absolutely right. In fact, I know it would, at least with JavaScript, it would. Yeah, because the way that browsers work, you should be able to click the link. The events bubble up the DOM to the anchor tag. So let's try it. What's the worst thing that could happen? Your fan turns on and your hard drive shorts out. You're right. It might work with Selenium, but not this. But I'm kind of hoping it works with this, but I'm not totally sure. It doesn't? Yeah, it doesn't work with the driver we're using. If we're using Selenium, it would. And actually, to me, that's actually what's that?
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Without JavaScript, the red propagation doesn't work.
That's true. That's true. That's a good point. Yeah. So it's kind of by design. Yeah, because there's no.
This is another thing that you should care about when you write. If you write the steps that work with multiple drivers, that's kind of fast topic.
So one thing that I keep talking about, you can run tests with curl or Selenium. What you'll actually have is on a scenario by scenario basis, you'll say, I'll run this one with curl, I'll run this one with JavaScript. Why don't you just run them all in JavaScript? Well, using Selenium is slow. So basically, you want to use curl unless you can't. So you might have two scenarios that don't use JavaScript, just use curl, and then the third one uses JavaScript, so you run that in Selenium. And by the way, again, I can't show you guys it as easily as you want. If you want to talk afterwards, we can get it actually working on the virtual machine. You can do this, but it takes a little more setup than we have time for. The way that you would change a scenario to use Selenium is that. You just put an @JavaScript above it. So if you need it, that's it, and then it changes to the Selenium driver. By the way, you don't have to use Selenium. There's also, I've had mixed success with it. Maybe you've had better. There's also a zombie driver. So it actually runs headless, but in zombie, which executes JavaScript. So you don't have to use Selenium. There are other things, but So that's actually one of the, I sort of just mentioned it, but that's actually one of the absolute killer features of this, because I can write all these scenarios. I'm not using any JavaScript. I'm super happy. Then all of a sudden, we refactor a page slightly so that a form now loads via JavaScript, and my tests fail. And I go, oh crap, like this perfect test now uses a page that has JavaScript. But I don't have to rewrite the test. I just add @JavaScript above it, and everything still works. So I don't have two different paths for my JavaScript versus non-JavaScript things. Is this working? Yes, awesome. It doesn't get much harder than this, really. All right, if you're having issues, grab Sasha. I'm going to keep going. We've not too much time left, but just enough time. Okay, so this is going to be the very, very small part of behavior-driven development, because again, we're sort of starting with the feature and then writing the test afterwards. We're going to change that a little bit. Well, actually, let me think about that. Hold on, I'm actually going. Yeah, I'm going to start here. So we're going to change that a little bit. We're going to change our, so here's basically the situation. Somebody comes to you and says, okay, we can't have the product admin feature open to the world. We need to require someone to log in first. Okay, we haven't developed that yet. The site does not require login right now. You can log in, but it doesn't require it. So first thing we're going to do before we actually implement this is go and add basically change our scenario to represent how we want things to work. Okay? And we're going to do this just to be extra fancy, so I'm going to show you guys two things at once. Since every scenario in this product admin feature is going to need you to be logged in, since we're going to require login for everything, we basically need the user to be logged in above at the beginning of every scenario. So we could just put the same few lines at the beginning of every scenario that says go to the login page, log in, we have those couple lines. If you ever have something that needs to happen before every scenario in a feature, you can add a background section. So this is something that goes between the feature, after the feature, but before the first scenario. So it has the same indentation as the scenario. It's out 4 spaces. And it works exactly like a scenario. You just start writing things that you want to do. So given, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what I want you guys to do is use the built-in definitions for filling out a form. I actually want you in the background to go to the login page, because we already have a working login page. It's just you're not forced to go to the login page. Go to the login page, fill out the username with admin, the password with admin, press login. I'll put it up here in a second, but we have already all of the built-in definitions to do this. So you're simply going to a page, filling out a form, and pressing submit. And when you do this, you should be able to rerun the tests, and this will happen at the beginning of every scenario. We're not requiring login yet, but actually logging in doesn't actually hurt anything. And if you really, we're not going to do it, if you really wanted to test this, you'd probably add let's see. If you really wanted to test this, you'd probably add a feature, another feature called like security or something like that, and actually test that if you went to the product section without logging in, that you saw some sort of an access denied page. So if you cared enough to really test this feature. So this is not the best example of behavior-driven development, but I just want to think about, well, actually this is not even that good of an example now that I think about it. In a perfect world, behavior-driven development, we wouldn't even have a login page yet. So as soon as we added these background steps, it would fail, because it would be like, there's no login page. And then we would build the login page, and our test would pass. Yeah, that is actually really nice.
You write the scenario, make it fail, and then iterate the factor code development until you get green. And at the end, you have your future development that you didn't see yet.
Yeah, it's
About that. It can help you through your performance, your workload.
It is. When you actually get used to this, that I actually developed that way a lot. It sounds kind of crazy, but yeah, you just write the scenario and you just run it, it fails, code a little bit, it still fails, code, it still fails, and then it's green. And yeah, you've never actually even seen the browser, the feature in the browser yet, and you know that it works.
Because developers like command line better than the browser, right?
Yeah. So it's actually, in some ways faster. It also helps like focus you. I know me personally, I add lots of extra features sometimes, and I'm worried about getting a text box in the right spot. So this focuses you on just getting it working. If you want to make it pretty afterwards, that's fine, but it focuses on like, here's the user story that's actually important. It passes, I'm done. So it's an easier way to determine like I'm finished because I've done everything I need to. I'm changing the order I'm doing things a little bit. So now let's actually lock down our site. This will sort of prove that this is working correctly. So there's a file called app/bootstrap.php. It's not really important. It's just part of the little app. But on line 66, you'll see that array line there is commented out. So if you uncomment that line, then all of a sudden the product area will require you to be logged in. You'll see this if you go in your browser. All of a sudden, if you go to the products page, you'll get sent to the login page. So if you uncomment out this line here in that file, then you actually do have security on your site and you do need to be logged in. Yeah. Nice. Not happy?
It's not letting me through background classes, but
Oh, interesting. This is a really bad gotcha. When I press login, and the reason it's not failing is because it's clicking the login link. We're about to talk about debugging.
showing our products.
Yeah, you're probably on the login page. We're actually right now we're gonna debug, but I'm guessing. So some of you guys have, and hopefully this has happened to all of you. For some of this is not working. You get to, in fact, let's break this for everybody. So some of you this is not working yet, others it's working. But here's how we could break it. Let's temporarily comment out. You can use the pound sign. That's funny. This is a markdown file, so it thinks that's an H1 tag. Yours doesn't need to be as big as mine, but if you put a pound sign at the beginning of a line, that's a comment. So if you comment that out, right, it should fail because we're going to the page, we're filling out the form, but we're not actually logging in. So now when we go to /products, it'll fail. So try this again. And which line fails when you try it without actually logging in? Exactly. The scenario will fail. Which line in the scenario fails? And what's the text on those? Yeah, exactly. It's the actual line is the line that says like, then I should see showing all products. Right? And if we didn't do that on purpose, it wouldn't be obvious what's happening here. What's happening in reality is when you click products, you're getting redirected to the login page. You're not actually on the product page because you're not logged in. But it's not really obvious, right? It just says, I don't see that text. And then you go check it again to make sure the text is okay. So we need a couple of ways to debug what's going on. Now, depending on if you're using, well, I want to talk about that one thing afterwards, the opening up. But depending on if you're using curl or if you're using Selenium, there's kind of two different good ways to debug. If you're using curl, like we are, the easiest way to debug, it's not the fanciest way to debug. We'll get fancier. But the easiest way to debug is right before the failing step. So let's see. Put So you guys have something like, then I should see, that's not exactly the text, but. So this is the step that's failing. I know I don't have the exact text there. So right before that, you temporarily put and print last response. This is a built-in definition. And what it's going to do is it's literally going to dump all of the HTML on whatever page it's on right now to the terminal. Not the coolest looking thing ever. There's a couple things we can do that's better than this, but this is the lowest level way to debug this. And of course we do it before the failing step, because as soon as Behat hits the failing step, it stops. So if you put this after the failing step, it will never actually run. And okay, so the HTML might or might not be helpful. It's kind of hard to read HTML in a terminal. Depending on your framework, for example, I use Symfony, so I can actually tell when the HTML prints out immediately that there's an exception on the page. And I'm like, that's not my site, that's an exception. And I can scroll up to the top and find the exception. But even more useful than that, if you scroll to the top of the output, the first line of the output's the URL. And a lot of times that's all you need to see, because like, what does our URL say right now? It says we're on the login page. You don't even need to read the HTML. You're like, I'm not on the right page. I'm not getting logged in. Something's going wrong with that. Okay? So this is your go-to for debugging. The two other ways to debug are the following. Actually, first, you explain the open command one.
Oh, okay.
Which we can't do because we're actually in a virtual machine.
I didn't prepare this, but the way I used to debug is because there are actually two ways to do this. You can
Actually, I have it. I'll pull it up.
There are some options that you can use, and if you do in terminal, you can run --help. Right?
Okay, cool.
It will probably list the options that you can use.
Come on, where's my... There we go. Mine's in the other directory. What's the option on this one? Oh, you're talking about the one that dumps. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Cool. So we have that behat.yaml file. So what do we put in the behat.yaml file? Well, the answer is you Google and you hack at it. But actually, if you run bin/behat --config-reference, it dumps out kind of a full, long example of everything that could go into there. So it.
Okay, so this is very interesting for us.
Yep.
So it's show auto and show command. These two, you see, it's disabled by default. But show auto, if we enable it, we can put true inside our config. And when Behat detects a failing step, it will try to pop up the page so we can see what is on the page. So if you, for example, made a type by following display product, and it should be display products or whatever, you will see the actual page. And show command will actually tell Behat how to open the page. For example, I use Chrome browser, and the command is Chrome browser %s. And Behat will replace this with temporary HTML file of response.
So it's like the terminal, except it opens it in a browser for you, so you can actually see it.
Like this, and in your Behat.yaml, right?
Mm-hmm.
And replace this with your favorite browser. When your step fails, it will actually open your page in a browser, so you can see what's wrong here. Do you have an exception? Do you made a typo or whatever? This is interesting, and you can actually go a step further. sometimes this is not enough. If you have a JavaScript on your page, this will render a page without JavaScript, maybe without CSS, I'm not sure, it depends. So you can even implement you can use after fail, or what is the annotation?
No, it's after scenario, and then you do it like an if statement.
Yeah, after scenario, and in after scenario you can actually assert the HTTP status code, and if it's not 200 OK, you can, for example, take a screenshot. If your
I'll put this link up there in a second.
yeah, for example, this is a very, very fancy thing to do. So
I'm gonna get bigger.
after that, we are checking if the result is 4. Yeah, the 4 is the error, right?
So basically, you know how we did after scenario earlier? So after scenario or any of these hooks are actually past an event object. This is all kind of like low level technical stuff, but you can say, did it fail? If it did, I want to do something.
It's actually important how you do it. It's important to know that you can even do this kind of stuff. You can check if your driver is Selenium, and you know that Selenium can take screenshots. If you use some another, you can just skip this, or you can make your steps optional this way. So there are many, many advanced techniques you can use to debug, and this is important in everyday development because it's really common to get errors, to make mistakes, you know, and it's important to know how to get out, and these tools can really help you a lot to
Awesome. I'll include this, I'll keep this link on the slides for a second so you guys can copy that down. There we go. And there's even one other one, if you Google for it, it's one of my favorites, which is, if you're interested in this, I can give you the link afterwards because I apologize, I don't actually have the link here. But there's one other one that's useful with Selenium, which you basically, in the same way that you do and print last response, you can say and break. And when you're using it in Selenium, it pops open the browser. It'll actually go, and then freeze at that one. And then you can actually like interact with the page in a real browser, click links, inspect element, and then once you're satisfied, then you can go back to the terminal and hit enter, and it keeps going. So that's not a built-in one, but I can show you guys how to do that. Again, it's one of those things where the implementing of it is not actually important. You just want to know that that's actually available because that's really, really helpful.
or you can, there's that you can sleep if you have some operations you need to wait for, some long-taking JavaScript and some third-party actions. You can say, and I sleep for 5 seconds, and you wait until 5 seconds.
All right, good. All right, so there's one more thing that I want to do. There's actually, so at this point, the only two little tiny things we haven't talked about, which are sort of optional, is one, we haven't done too much stuff with JavaScript yet, but again, there's no difference. You just have to have @JavaScript above you. We're in a virtual machine, so it's a little bit more difficult, but it's actually still possible to do this, and be happy to like go through with people after this on how to do that. But really, JavaScript's no different. The only special situation with JavaScript, because literally it's just put @JavaScript above there. As long as you have Selenium running, it will work. The only gotcha with JavaScript is that occasionally you have something that, this is exactly what Sasha was just saying, you have some AJAX functionality that needs to wait for a second. Because what Mink and Selenium is really good at is, it's really good at waiting for full page loads. So when you say when I click, it's not going to try to do the next thing until that page actually loads, but that's not true with JavaScript. So if you click a button and it makes an AJAX request and then pops open in a dialog, it's not going to wait for that. It's going to say when I click, and then it's immediately, because it detects that there's no full page refresh, it's immediately going to run the next one. Okay? I'm going to give you guys some resources at the end of this to show you how to do that, how to kind of handle those situations. But there are ways inside of Mink to do something like, to create a step that says something like, when I click add new, and I wait for the dialog to appear. So that would be a new custom step, and there's actually a way in Mink to say, don't do anything until this CSS element appears and is visible. So you don't wait for 5 seconds or 10 seconds. You wait for only as long as it takes for that to come up. So one thing you do not want to do let's plant this into your head, is you do not want to start saying things like, when I wait for 5 seconds. Because that's going to make your test run really slow, and eventually they're going to fail because your system is under a lot of load anyways. So you'll always wait, but you'll wait for a specific thing to happen. And I know that's abstract because I'm not showing you the code because it's beyond this, but I'll give you guys some resources. All right, we have 5 minutes left. All right, I think we can get through this in the next couple minutes. So the only other thing that we haven't talked about, and this is totally optional, but it's very important, is everything we've done so far is very black box testing. This site could be, like I said, written in Java on a server in China. It's fine. We're not interacting with it in any way. And that's okay. And a lot of people will test that. They'll use Behat to test their staging servers, for example. If you can have it locally, though, then you can get a lot. You can get a lot more powerful with it. For example, one of the things that we are assuming right now with our tests is that there is a user in the database with admin as the username and password as an admin. If our database changes, our test will actually fail. So we shouldn't be making that assumption. We should actually have a given that says, given there is an admin user, something that actually guarantees that. And when that step is run, we should actually go to our local database and insert that user into the database. So if we are in a local copy, then we can actually kind of play God with the database and properly prepare the database beforehand. Okay? So I'm going to show you an example of how to do that with this site, which is a Silex site, but the basic idea is going to be the same if you're using Easy Publish or anything else. Basically, the secret is that in your feature context class, you need to be able to kind of boot your application so that you can get access to all the normal database functions that you're used to having when you're in your code. Because we all have functions already to talk to the database. If we could get access to those, we'd be fine. So to do this, I just wanted you guys to kind of see this. Inside the resources directory, again, there's another class called app context. I want you to copy that into features/bootstrap. So right now, actually go ahead and do that, and I'll talk as we go. Right now, when Behat boots, there's just a single feature context, right? And that's the only thing it parses. But really, you can actually have as many context classes as you want. And you might have many context classes purely for organization. Some people do this a lot. And so you can actually create other context classes in that directory. And then inside the behat.yaml file, you just need to tell Behat that those classes exist. So you could have 5 context classes, list them here, and then when Behat loads, it parses all of those definitions, all those sentences from each of your context files. So there's no technical reason you have to do this. It's just an organizational thing. So this app context thing that I've prepared is something that is very good at talking to my local application. That's why I called it app context. It can add users to my application's database. It's all very specific to my app, but you can imagine if you're using Easy Publish or something, you just replace the code inside of this with things specific to the Easy Publish functions. And what I want you to be able to do is, once you've done this, you should be able to run bin/behat-dl and see a couple of extra definitions show up in the list because there's a couple of extra functions inside of there. We have just a couple minutes left, and some of the details here are less important because I don't care if you guys know how this application works. So I'm going to make sure we get through the last bit here. App context. Oh. Oops. The one thing I want to point out here with the trick for your application is that typically, let's say I'm using I'm not using a framework at all. I'm using some flat PHP application that's so old and everyone hates it, but that's what we're using. Well, how do I get access to its low-level functions? Well, ultimately, there's usually a file or a couple of files that you just need to require. If you require our functions.php or something, then you have access to the application, right? And we just need to be able to do this one time. So the trick usually is, again, to use one of those hooks. So we've already seen an after scenario hook. There's also before scenario. This one is before suite. It runs just once Even if you have 10 features and 50 scenarios, it runs just one time, because that makes sense. We only need to boot our application one time. And all I'm doing here is just, in my application, I just need to require this file. I'm just requiring that file. And that's it. And in fact, I'm storing a global object somewhere, but maybe your application doesn't have that. So this is the part that's difficult because it's different for every application, but it's ultimately going to look something like this. We need to boot our app. Okay? And then everything else inside of this is just me using the functions specific to my application. You guys would use your own functions, and that's basically the idea. So with this, last thing I want you guys to do, and this kind of illustrates the last point of assume nothing in your scenarios. Don't assume there are 5 products in the database. Don't assume there's a user in the database, because the user won't be there tomorrow. So let's guarantee that user is there. If you guys go back to kind of the admin homepage, there's an empty database. I think it's actually empty DB link on the left side of the page. So that'll empty the database. No user anymore. Oh crap. So what do you think is going to happen when we run the test? The test is totally going to fail. So I'm just illustrating the real world, right? Things are going to get removed from the database. So to fix this, guarantee that there's a user in the database. If you need the user, guarantee it's there. There's already a built-in definition in your application. So to go through the whole process in your application when you need to solve this problem, you're going to write this line first. You're going to say, I need to make sure there's an admin user in the database. So you're going to write this, and then it's going to generate the function for you. And then in that function, you'll actually use your application-specific features to make sure that user's in the database. So that my app context is sort of doing that for us. But this is now a definition that we have, so we can use that. Notice I am not saying what the password is or what the username is of this. You could do that. So I could have something that says, given there is a user admin with password admin in this step, it's sort of up to you. Really, I don't care. This is what we were talking about. I don't care what the username or password is necessarily of this. I mean, I actually sort of do. Well, I sort of do because we reference it below, the username admin, password admin. This is not a great example, but basically, you don't have to put any details here that you don't really care about. So, let's see. Actually, that's all I'm going to say about that. I don't have the best example to make the point, so I'm just going to confuse you guys if I try to say that again. So if you don't care, sort of what I'm saying, if you don't care who is actually logged in, you don't necessarily need to put the username in these steps when you create them. You can imagine in your application you might have 2 of these steps. One that says given the admin user exists or given an admin user exists in the database. And you might have another one that says given a normal user exists in the database. You don't necessarily care what their usernames are. But when you say given an admin user exists in the database, you create a user with some username, give it some special privileges. The other one creates a different user but no special privileges. Is that passing? I know I'm going a little faster right at the end here. Only once. Oh, yes, I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, only once. That's fine. Don't worry about the second time. Hope you enjoyed the class. I'm just kidding. So why does it fail the second time? Bingo, yeah. Because there's already an admin user in the database, so the way that I wrote that function, it doesn't check if the user's already there. It just adds a user to the database. So there's 2 ways to fix that, right? We could just improve my code to say, no, there's already an admin user there. Let's leave it. You'd probably still want to make sure that its password is what you want it to be, because there could be an admin user there with a different password. You could get into a weird situation like that. But more importantly, this highlights the the critical point of scenarios need to be independent of each other. So right now your first scenario is passing, your second scenario will fail because it's sort of colliding with the first scenario. The first scenario added that user in its background. When the background ran for the second scenario, there's already one there. So this is actually the last slide, which you guys don't even need to do. So one of the things that you might want to do, you sort of want to assume at the beginning of every scenario that the database is totally empty. Now in reality, you might not totally empty your database because in a lot of databases you have lookup tables, you know, those annoying tables where you have 10 values that always need to be there because your application depends on them. So you might not empty your database entirely, but there's probably a couple of tables that would be nice to empty. In our application, it might be a good idea to empty the user table before every scenario and empty the product table before every scenario, so we kind of have a clean place to start. So you can do this if you want to, but you don't need to. But inside of my app context, I have a function called clear data, and it does exactly that. It uses my application-specific code to just empty a couple of the tables. And if I want this to run before every scenario, you just need to add the before scenario annotation before it.
In Behat community, they say you need to reset your world.
Reset your world. Yeah. I've even seen, I mean, this is so application specific, and some databases are huge and they have 150 tables and 50 of them need to be always preloaded with this configuration data. So I've even seen people that keep like a SQL dump of an empty-ish database, and then their before scenario they actually, you know, drop the tables and reload the tables with that SQL. That's a bit heavy-handed, but honestly, if you have 50 tables that always need to have that very special configuration data there, then it's actually a pretty good idea.
There's a good news that in planned next feature for Behat is running your test in parallel. So
Yeah.
probably you need to be able to run several scenarios at the same time, which can then make things faster. Because it is a problem. Scenarios usually take time. That's why people use continuous integration and run them on separate servers, so you don't need to wait for them to actually finish.
Yeah, in reality, if you have a big, depending on what you're doing here, and if you have a big enough site, this actually could start to slow you down.
Before scenario is before each scenario.
That's right, before each scenario, which is important because the scenarios should be independent of each other. That's why. Yeah. Does that make sense? Okay, go ahead.
I think this scenario should be kept separate, small.
Mm-hmm.
There I agree.
Exactly. Yeah, very focused.
Because they are in a big context. Let's say we have an admin interface, we have a huge database, and we want to try test different steps.
Mm-hmm.
Then we would need to set up the environment at the beginning of several scenarios.
Yes, there are a few ways to fix this. You can, for each scenario, you can have fixtures to set up your world. So you set, I don't know, the data, this user, these products, you can set that. And
That's
just
right, yeah.
write a small scenario to test the actual functionality. And if you want to test this particular scenario with different data, you can even have different examples. So you can have some kind of placeholders, so you can change inputs for same scenario, and there are tools to do this. So
Yeah, because right now we sort of think it's a really good thing. I have like, okay, to set up, I need 5 users, 10 products. I need to relate those things. So you can imagine that these would be givens. Given I have user A, given I have user B. You know, even if you put that in a background, it's like, whoa, I have all these things. So Sasha's saying.
you can also use some set me world A.
Exactly, that's okay.
World A, set world B.
So given I have the.
That's huge, but your feature context class
Will be big, yeah. So you could have something that's like, given I have the typical user product scenario set up. You have a line that says that. That's not as descriptive as 50 lines, but nobody's going to read 50 lines either. And then in that one function, you will have those 50 lines of code that say create this, create this, create this, create that.
And even after that, you can remove these 50 lines of code and use some tools to prepare the setup. You know. So
All
In the
right.
community, they use Alice for fixtures. You can kind of separate fixture setups for different scenarios, stuff like that.
All right. All right, so we're already past time. There's a couple details, like I said, we had to rush through with the JavaScript and things like that. So this is Camp University. This is online screencast that we do. I'm plugging this only because I'm going to give you guys free access in case you want to check a few other things. So I don't have a coupon code right this second, but I'm about to create one. So we talk more about the booting up of your application. We talk more about I have the debugging thing, the and I break thing is there. If you guys go to that right now, the scripts are totally free. I'm going to put a coupon code up there in case you want to actually watch the video, but even without the coupon code, you guys can just read all of the text and stuff like that. And of course, there's other resources on Behat as well. Cool. I'll create that coupon code in a second. Doesn't actually work yet, but write that down. Awesome. Does anybody have any questions? Are you all experts? Yes. You got one?
I got it.
Good.
So yesterday, Paul, you can talk to him. He's the creator of Sirius e-commerce solution, and the Sirius is built from start using PHP Stack and Behat. And almost all features of these e-commerce systems are covered with Behat scenarios. And I saw on Twitter a few days ago that the greatest resource for learning Behat and PHP Stack is Sirius. So if you go to GitHub/Sirius, you can look through the Sirius source code and see the actual scenarios. If you click
Main one?
yeah. And if you click on build, hold on. Build, it's failing currently, but never mind. You will actually see that we're using Travis continuous integration and click and Java. And you will actually see the scenarios.
Scroll down. There we go.
Okay, so this is actually the true benefit of using Behat in real world. Because we have these scenarios, and now this can serve as a documentation for Sirius. And you can look through all of our feature classes to see how it's implemented and to see how scenarios looks in the real world. It's not perfect, but it's good for learning. And another good use case when we are at Sirius now is that when you use Behat, you can report bugs with scenarios. For example, let's say that the shop we just built have a bug when you submit empty form. And problem with reporting bugs is to describe how to reproduce them. And we have cases in real world when people came and, okay, here's the failing scenario for your bug.
Yeah.
Fix it. And it's perfectly easy for me to just paste the scenario in, run it, see it fails, and fix it. So it's a good way to communicate between Q&A managers, business people. So yeah, look at Sirius. It's a good resource for learning Behat.
Yeah, very good. Sweet. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, the cut coverage, I don't think it's a good idea for Behat because even Sirius, it's over-tested. You should not overtest your application because it will become painful to maintain your tests. So it's a kind of good practice to cover only the key features of your product. For example, if you're building the e-commerce system, it's important that your checkout works. Yeah? That your checkout doesn't break. But if your admin page for product breaks, it's not a big deal. The admin will report the bug and you will fix it. So I cannot give a perfect recipe for what should be covered. It comes with experience, with, you know.
But there is no test coverage thing specifically, but it sort of has to be because you're testing sort of URLs, you're not testing classes, you know? So you're not testing like, that's what PHP unit does. It sort of says like, this function is tested, and this function is tested, but we're kind of black box on the outside. There's been some discussion about it before, and I think that's usually the answer is like sort of, it's sort of not supposed to have that just because of the nature of it. But does PHP spec have coverage? Yeah, so that's this afternoon.
But I don't think it very much sense.
There you go.
But that is an extension.
So in the Cilius repo, not surprisingly then, you have a features directory. So it really is just like what we did. And they further broke theirs down into subsections, but you'll find everything in there just like ours. All right, cool. And don't forget to please rate the talk and win fabulous prizes. And every time you vote, you get entered. So you can even vote on other ones you didn't go to, probably. I don't know, and maybe get extra entrances. I think that's legal. Oh yeah, the URL. Boop. There we go. I'll bring this over there as well. All right, awesome. I know I kept you guys over, so thank you guys very, very much. You guys moved through things very nicely. So yeah, thank you, and I'll see you guys later. Hopefully you guys will come back in the afternoon for PHP spec. I will talk less. He will talk more.
Questions around Behat, we can probably tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow I think afternoon we have a roundtable, yeah.
In the whole and ask whatever you're interested in.
So awesome. So thank you guys.